Well, of course, being a colony of Great Britain, Australia took its legal system. It also took the method of execution from Britain, which therefore, of course, would have been hanging.
In 1964, January 1964, when I started in Fremantle on the 13th. It was a week before Brian Robinson was executed. Monday morning, the 13th. And on the 20th, my shift started at 6 o'clock. It was a hot, sticky day. When I arrived, there was the protesters outside the gate, banners waving. One got wrapped around the back of my head. It's a strange day.
The usual practice in Australia was to execute people at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, which meant that the prisoner would be woken up at 5:30, given a chance to have a shower, to prepare themselves, and they would then be, at a few minutes to 8, they would be taken into a holding cell, and then they would be pinioned, the arms. They would be taken in to the death cell, and they would have their legs strapped. A white cotton hood would be placed on their head, and the entire execution, from the moment they met their executioner, would be over in about a minute.
What goes through the mind of someone of death row? I'm thinking that first, when you first go in there, it's going to be a depression, it's going to be anger towards the system, it's going to be anxiety, despair, because in a way, what society has done is done the ultimate rejection, which is rejecting a person's life. It's taken their life.
He worked with two death row prisoners who were convicted of murder and sentenced to die. That was Brian W. Robinson, and the other one's name was Mervyn Fellows. And he worked with them as a barrister in the courts, defending their cases and things like that. He also became quite close to them. Mervyn Fellows was an Aboriginal man who was convicted of murder. And in that situation, my grandfather always felt that maybe he was wrongly convicted. He felt very strongly about Mervyn Fellows' case. And Brian W. Robinson was a family man who was convicted of murder. He was drunken brawl sort of situation in Perth.
Came in, there's so much noise, protest from the prisoners. They made a hell of a bloody racket. Then 1 minute to 8, there was a silence. And the rest of the day, I wondered why the hell I was doing this job.
When you're that close to death, you can come to being enlightened. Now, enlightenment comes from, a big part of enlightenment is the contemplation of death. This is what Buddhists do, contemplating death. All right? When you do that, then you have a different view of death.
Whole opinion completely reversed around, and he was actually quite an advocate against the death penalty in the end. He didn't feel it was the right way to go with dealing with murderers or any sort of criminals.
Everyone executed in Fremantle was executed for murder. There were, particularly in the sort of 18th century, you would find that there were many examples of people being executed for stealing 5 shillings worth of cloth. But by the time Fremantle Prison was running, murder was the only prerequisite for execution.
It's all over with very quick. You hear that trap door go and you can hear the neck crack. It's virtual decapitation. It severs the spinal cord between C1 and C2. And you get the involuntary twitching. And silence.
Yeah, he was actually there when Brian Robinson was executed, with Mervyn Fellows. After watching Brian die in that situation, he said that he couldn't do that again, even though he wanted the people that he was defending to know that he was there until the very end. He just couldn't watch Mervyn Fellows die. It says in his diary that he actually heard Brian's neck snap.
Eventually, the cause of the shutting down of the prison was, of course, there was a huge riot there, which ended up with a lot of damage and with at least one of the prison guards being stabbed, which all apparently came down in the end that they wanted a few more servings of beans and a couple more windows. And I have talked to one or two of the guards at the prison, and their memories of the riot are still very fresh.
No, I don't believe that any crime deserves the death penalty. You can't put yourself in the position of, well, you're bringing yourself down to the same level as a person who committed the crime in the first place. Does one crime justify another? You're taking life. Can't do that.